I focused on hormones and inflammation. I lost 80 pounds of fat in 9 months. I went from 34% body fat at my highest to 6% body fat at my leanest. And that was 17 plus years ago. I am proof that it worked and I kept it off since then. If you answer yes to 2 of these 6 questions, high probability you're a sugar burner and probably have insulin resistance. First question is, do you feel tired after eating meals? Blood sugar, when it's elevated, it will age you very fast. It will strip collagen from your body, which makes your skin look old and wrinkly. Visibly, it ages you, but internally, it's aging you as well. When you're a sugar burner, you're not metabolically free. You're in a metabolic prison. If you let all the groceries inside of your refrigerator expire, but don't throw them away, it's going to be a toxic environment. The human body is very similar. We have cells and mitochondria that all have an expiration date. And autophagy, 16, 17 hours into a fast, gets activated to start getting rid of those expired cells. I'm not against those fatty coffees, but if your goal is to burn fat, you want to remove the fat from your coffee. You want to lower the fat intake. You want to focus on protein.
Ben, when it comes to fat loss, you've accumulated a ton of knowledge over the years, and you also have your personal experience being obese. This is back in your 20s. If you could go back to Ben in his late 20s, mentally disheveled, physically as well, what would you tell yourself that you've learned along the way since to help guide you?
I would tell myself that, hey, Ben, you don't have a weight problem. Those watching and listening who are overweight right now, you also don't have a weight problem. There's actually no such thing as a weight problem. It's actually a weight symptom. And like so many people, I was guilty of this myself. I kept treating my obesity and extra weight, belly fat, as the problem. It's actually a result of the problem. It's a symptom. So when you look at your extra weight as the problem, you're going to do things that will leave you frustrated. And I know it did for me. One of those things was just focusing on calories, exercising more, eating less. That premise that I followed, and so many people follow to this day, the premise is this: I need to lose weight to get healthy. I soon discovered that that is not how the metabolism works. We do not lose weight to get healthy. We get healthy to lose weight. When we focus on hormones and inflammation, the weight comes off as a side effect. I didn't know this as I was obese, as you mentioned, in my early 20s. So I simply focused on, I got to move more. I got to exercise. I have to do CrossFit, P90X, exercise more, run, count my calories, cut my calories. And the tricky thing about calorie counting and cutting calories is that it works. Most of the time, it works in the beginning. Eventually, the metabolism starts to adapt to the energy coming in and the weight slows down. You hit a stall. That's exactly what happened to me. And the first thought is, oh, I just need to exercise more. I need to cut more or do a combination of both. And then it works a little bit more and the weight comes off. And then all of a sudden it comes back on and it stalls. It's such a frustrating loop to follow that method. I did it for so many years. So I would tell myself, look, Ben, let's find out where there's interference in your lifestyle, foods, thoughts, your environment that's causing inflammation, causing your hormones to be imbalanced, not allowing them to get into the cells. Let's remove that interference. Then the weight will start to come off. And you know what, Jesse? That's exactly what I did 17 plus years ago. I focused on hormones and inflammation. I lost 80 pounds of fat in 9 months. I went from 34% body fat at my highest to 6% body fat at my leanest. And that was 17 plus years ago. I am proof that it worked and I kept it off since then. And I was overweight and obese for 20 plus years. I have all the bad genetics. My dad was obese. My dad had diabetes. I have all those genes, but I am proof that your genes are not your destiny. It is the inflammation that will determine if you turn on genes or turn them off. I was able to turn off the bad genes, and that's what I want to share with your audience today, how to do the same thing.
Okay, you shared a few different levers we have there when it comes to getting to the root. One being diet, lifestyle, and thoughts. As to not overwhelm people, let's talk about the biggest lever in that realm.
The simplest thing that I would start right now is to look at the ingredients list. I know it sounds so simple. We hear it all the time. Read the labels, but I'm telling you, this is where I would start. I'll give you an example, and I talk about this in Metabolic Freedom. If we look at a whole potato that we buy at the supermarket, the ingredients list is non-existent. It's just the potato. It's what you see in front of you. Compare that to potato chips. There's 15, 20 ingredients. There's processed seed oils. There's inflammatory ingredients, things we cannot pronounce. It's the processed version of that potato. So if we simply just eat, to start, the whole food version of these foods, avocado, egg, chicken, beef, I mean, these are real food, and stay away from the packaged, boxed foods, we're going to lower inflammation. We're going to start losing weight. We're going to have more energy. That's the first step right there. Now, the second thing I would do is to eliminate the snacking and the grazing, even if it's healthy. Every time you snack and you graze, number one, you start the digestive system, the digestive processes, which is taking energy away from the brain, taking energy away from healing, and it's being used for digestion. There's a lot of energy being used for digestion. Number two, you raise glucose and insulin. And every time you spike glucose and insulin, you are signaling to your metabolism, store energy. In other words, store fat. And it disrupts you from burning fat. It's like, I know we both work in our offices here at home. We have our studios. If we got into a flow state and we're getting work done, but every 2 to 3 hours, somebody's banging on the door and disrupting your workflow, that's exactly what snacking is doing to your fat burning workflow. It's disrupting that workflow. You spike glucose and insulin. As you continue to do that over the years, it leads to insulin resistance, diabetes, and a whole host of metabolic diseases. So the first two steps, very simple. Eat whole foods instead of processed foods. If there's an ingredient you cannot pronounce on a food label, don't eat it. If you see processed vegetable oils, seed oils, high fructose corn syrup, don't eat it. And then eliminate the snacking and then build from there. That's the way I would start.
All right, well, let's continue to move forward. Somebody that's already taken these on, stop snacking, remove processed foods. They're ready for the next step. Where do they go?
The next step is to build lean muscle. And when I say lean muscle, I am not saying to be a bodybuilder or a CrossFitter. I'm saying to put on lean muscle. You know what's really interesting, Jesse? When I dove into the research on the metabolism, as I was writing this brand new book, Metabolic Freedom, I really wanted to see what studies are showing when it comes to the metabolism and fat loss. Because over the years, I've heard so many people say, oh, ever since I hit 40 years old, my metabolism slowed down, or 50 years old, it slowed down. I have a slow metabolism. And to my surprise, I discovered that the metabolism doesn't necessarily even work in speeds. It's either efficient or it's inefficient. And one of the major studies that I found, one of the most comprehensive studies done ever on the metabolism, was a Duke 2021 study that I put in the book. In the study, there was 6,600 people in the study from different countries, not just the US, but all across the world, from the ages of 1 all the way to 95 years old and everything in between, assessing their metabolism. They used a really sophisticated process to assess their metabolism. And here's what the study said. The study said between the ages of 20 years old and 60 years old, there are no significant changes in the metabolism. Once we hit 60 years old, the study says there's a 0.7% decline in the metabolism every year after 60 years old. That might sound like bad news for those watching and listening who are 60 years old or over. However, the study said the reason why the metabolism starts to decline is loss of muscle mass. So if you build lean muscle mass and preserve it, by the time you reach age 60 or older, or if you're over 60 right now and start working on building lean muscle mass, you could be 85 years old with the same metabolism as when you were 25 years old. So building lean muscle is very, very important. Of course, you want to focus on high quality protein and essential amino acids. Personally, I'm looking to put on 10 pounds of muscle mass this year. I'm taking my essential amino acids. I'm getting about 1 gram of protein per pound of my ideal body weight, which is what I would recommend for your audience. To unpack that, if you are currently 170 pounds, and let's say your goal weight is to be 130 pounds, you want to aim to consume 130 grams of protein per day, 1 gram of protein per pound of that ideal body weight. And I'm taking creatine, I'm getting quality sleep. These are ways to increase your muscle mass to make sure your metabolism continues to burn fat throughout your lifespan.
Talk more about creatine. There's a lot of talk in our world, people taking that and the benefits in the mental health realm as well and cognitive boosting. How much are you taking?
I'm taking 10 grams of creatine per day. Some days I'll take 15 grams if I'm really, really active. It's a mitochondrial support. And to your point, Jesse, the brain has the most mitochondria per cell. So the brain really benefits, cognitive benefits, helps with brain fog, helps with mood, helps with energy and focus. But all of your cells have mitochondria with the exception of red blood cells. So every cell will benefit from taking creatine. It helps with exercise performance, exercise recovery. It's so well researched in literature. It's not an expensive supplement. It's a supplement that every human being needs to take. 5 to 10 grams a day seems to be the sweet spot. I know colleagues of mine that take 15 to 20 grams. I'm sure you've interviewed a few experts out there that do the same thing. It's pretty safe to take as well. So I'm a big fan of creatine.
Okay, so you're focusing on protein, taking creatine, building muscle. We haven't really talked about carbs yet. Again, somebody coming to this with extra fat on the body, and that being a motivating factor for getting into what we're talking about today. How do you look at that macro?
I look at the macro as something you want to lower if you are overweight. Absolutely. 2022 study showed that 93% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. In the book, I call them being in a keto deficiency. They're essentially in a fat burning deficiency. They need to lower their carbohydrate intake. If you're overweight right now, you have high levels of glucose and insulin. And when we look at the three macronutrients, it's really simple: protein, carbohydrates, and fat. It is the carbohydrates that will raise blood glucose and blood insulin more than fat and protein. Protein barely, there's a moderate response to protein. Fat barely moves the blood glucose and insulin, but it's the carbohydrates that will raise it. The average American, and maybe in Canada it's the same thing, consumes around 250 grams of carbohydrates per day, and they're eating throughout the entire day, every 2 to 3 hours, snacking and grazing, meal, snacking and grazing, meal, snacking and grazing. That's going to raise glucose and insulin. So to your point, Jesse, yes, we want to lower the carbs. Now, how low should you bring it? Well, it really depends on how much fat loss you want. For most people that really want to get exceptional fat loss and rapidly lower that hormone insulin, which is a fat storage, energy sensing hormone, we want to drop our total carbohydrates to 50 total grams per day as the upper limit, with those carbohydrates being non-starchy carbohydrates, green leafy vegetables. You could get away with some low glycemic fruit like blueberries, but 50 total grams per day, no more than that of carbohydrates, with the focus being protein and fat and no snacking in between meals.
From reading your book, it sounds like somebody coming to this early on might have to bring that carb level down even more as their body's adjusting if they're a real sugar burner at that time. And then over time, they might be able to allow a little bit more as their body gets more metabolically healthy.
Yes, exactly. And not only are they allowed more later on, I highly recommend you bring in more carbohydrates eventually. In the 30-day plan at the end of the book, the final week, that fourth week in the plan, has two what I call metabolic flex days, where we strategically increase healthy carbs to around actually 150 grams of carbs for those days. And I know I'm in the keto space, and Keto Kamp's my company. You see it on my shirt here behind me. There's a sign that says Keto Kamp. I love keto. I think keto is such a powerful tool. It's absolutely incredible. But what makes me different than the most keto people out there is that I don't believe in long-term continuous ketosis. I believe in metabolic flexibility. For most people, 93% of people out there, they need keto. We want to get you fat adapted because you're a sugar burner. But then you work on the metabolism, like you just said, Jesse. Then you've done the work to reintroduce healthy carbs. Metabolic freedom is the ability to burn carbohydrates, to burn fat, to burn protein, to burn your own body fat, to go back and forth, produce energy, and feel good. That's what I want for people. So yes, not only is it a good idea to bring in carbs eventually, I think it's actually necessary.
And I want to highlight there the fact that when you're bringing carbs in, this is intentional, because you also talk about in your new book, carbohydrate creep.
Yeah.
Where somebody over time might start being more lax with the carbohydrates in their diet throughout the week, say they're taking time on the weekend to up those carbs 1 day a week, what you're just talking about there, the Keto Flex, we want to make sure that we're intentional with that and not allowing carbs to creep in throughout the week and then not getting into ketosis, maybe thinking we are.
That's correct. Yeah, the carbohydrate creep happens a lot. So when we think about like condiments and ketchup and maybe even having a little bit extra carbs, those are all things that will add up to your total carbohydrate intake. And look, if you're not testing your blood glucose and your blood ketones, you don't know. You don't know what your carbohydrate threshold is. To your point, some people need to drop their total carbohydrates under 30 grams or 20 grams per day because they have insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes. Some people could get away with 50 grams. And look, the more muscle mass you have, you could actually some people could get away with 70 grams of carbs per day and still maintain like ketosis. But those metabolic flex days, which are also keto flex days, are strategic. And there's a really important point with those days. A higher carb day is planned out, first and foremost. It's not a cheat day, it's a feast day. And it's also a low fat day. We do not want to increase carbs and have high fat at the same time. It interferes with the Randle cycle. And the Randle cycle simply means when you consume a meal with high carbohydrates and high fat, like the standard American diet, the Randle cycle will prioritize metabolizing the sugar from the carbohydrates first. And the fat will pool up in the bloodstream and lead to high triglycerides and LPS, which is an inflammatory marker that you could look at in the body as well. That's not good. So ideally, when you increase the carbs, and I talk about this in the book, it's a low fat day, under 50 total grams of fat on those higher carb days.
And how do you look at fat during the week on a keto day? I know you have your 2-2-2 rule where additional fats are being added in intentionally. Talk about what that is. And is that a tool just for the beginning or something you still use?
That's a tool for the beginning, Jesse. That's a tool as we lower carbohydrate intake. The first week of your 30-day plan in the book is to go from burning sugar to burning fat. So we're lowering the carbs and we're introducing healthy fats in with that 2-2-2 rule. So for those who want to know what that is, read the book, but no, I'll share it with you. It's 2 tablespoons of avocado oil or olive oil per day, 2 tablespoons of butter or ghee per day, and 2 tablespoons of coconut oil or MCT oil per day. The question I get asked all the time, am I just consuming these fats as a meal? No, it's throughout the entire day. It's with your foods. Think about the salad dressings, the dips. Think about what you're cooking your food in and get those fats in. But it's only for the first 7 days. It is a high fat approach as you lower the carbs for that first week because we want to teach your metabolism as it's switching over from burning sugar to burning fat to start utilizing those fatty acids from those healthy fats as a fuel source. Once you're fat adapted, which means you're in ketosis after that first week, we remove that 2-2-2 rule and we focus on protein. We hit that 1 gram of protein per pound of your ideal body weight I outlined earlier. And we only get the fat that comes naturally with the protein. A big mistake people make in the keto space is they look at it as a high fat diet all the time. And sure, it can be, but if you're looking to burn fat, especially belly fat, when you consume too much fat, your metabolism needs to metabolize the fat from the calories before it goes to burning your body fat. So when we lower the the fat, and focus on protein, you're going to tap into your body fat as getting your fat percentage. So when we Google the macronutrients or percentages of macronutrients on a keto diet, we'll see 80% fat, 15% protein, 5% carbohydrates. That's not necessarily true. You could get your fat calories on keto from the plate of food in front of you or from your body fat. And if you have extra weight, I think it's better to get it from your body fat.
Talk more about that piece. It's something I've wanted more clarification on myself. The fact that when we lower blood glucose, lower insulin, if we're not consuming fat, we're going to dip into burning our own body fat. But what if somebody is sipping on, say, a butter coffee or a coffee with coconut oil in it throughout the day? It sounds like by what you just said, the body's not going to tap into body fat stores unless we're eliminating that for a period of time.
Correct. And I'm not against those fatty coffees. I love them. And it's a great replacement for oatmeal or donuts or bagels. So great swap. But if your goal is to burn fat and burn that stubborn belly fat, you want to remove the fat from your coffee. You want to lower the fat intake. You want to focus on protein because, yes, it's true. Your body needs to metabolize the calories coming in from the fat, even if it's the coffee or whatever it is. And it needs to use that first, and then it goes back to your body fat. So, yeah, you'll still lose weight doing that. It'll just take longer. If you really want an efficient plan here, I would recommend lowering that fat intake and focusing on protein. You want to consume the fat that naturally comes with the protein. If you eat a ribeye and cook it in butter, there's fat there. There's no need to add extra butter. There's no need to add fats to the coffee. Just have the fat that naturally comes with the protein and the fats that you cook the protein in.
For somebody who is insulin resistant, metabolically unhealthy, coming to our conversation today and making the switches we're talking about, how quickly can they reverse that and get rid of insulin resistance?
What's interesting about insulin resistance is that it's such a sneaky thing. There is a study called the Whitehall Study 2 that I put in the book. Chapter 2, I talk about being a sugar burner. And when you're a sugar burner, it leads to metabolic disease. That means you have insulin resistance. And it's really tricky because most people, they're not testing their fasting insulin. They are testing their fasting blood sugar, which is a great metric, and their A1C, which is another great metric, looking at the 3-month average of their blood sugars. But the Whitehall Study 2 shows that you could have full-blown hyperinsulinemia, insulin resistance, for on average 6 to 14 years without your fasting blood sugars changing at all, or even your hemoglobin A1C changing at all. That is because your body, your pancreas is so busy producing massive amounts of insulin to clear that excess glucose for years until it cannot, until the receptor sites for insulin go deaf to the screams. Then there's an increase in your blood sugar, and then you're diagnosed with prediabetes. And if you wait long and you don't test, it's full on type 2 diabetes or diabetes. So if we just got a fasting insulin blood test, we could stop this, nip it in the bud. A fasting insulin blood test you want to see in the single digits. Ideally, the functional range is between 3 and 6, really small margin there. When I test mine, it's always 3.3, 3.2. The reference range that comes back on that lab report for a fasting insulin is between 3 and 25. Some labs, it's between 3 and 28. Which is wild because if you come back as 11 or 17 or 21, most doctors will not flag it as being an issue, but that is insulin resistance. It's a problem. If you have anything over 6, it's an issue. And it's the first domino to fall that triggers high blood pressure, weight gain, obesity, diabetes. And once you're diagnosed with diabetes, that's when it opens up a whole world of metabolic diseases. You get an increase in cancer, increase in heart disease, increase in kidney failure, vision loss, neuropathy, a whole bunch of bad things happen. And nobody really even dies from diabetes. It's pretty rare. It's what the diabetes leads to, the strokes, the heart disease, the cancer. But if you just got a fasting insulin, you could see that it's going in the wrong direction and make a change right now. I encourage everybody watching and listening to get a fasting insulin test. Usually insurance companies don't cover it. You would have to pay out of pocket, but it's a very inexpensive test, $30, $60 in the US. Highly recommend everybody get that.
Okay. Other than fasting insulin, any other objective tests people can have done to see where they're at in relation to insulin resistance? And then for somebody at home right now, thinking they might be in that category, which given the stats of 90+% of people right now are metabolically unhealthy, aka insulin resistant, any symptoms they can look for without going to the doctor to get an idea of what's going on?
Yes, I'll start with the symptoms and then I'll talk about some other metrics for testing that we can look at. In that same chapter 2 in the book about being a sugar burner, actually it's chapter 3, not chapter 2, I have a sugar burner quiz where I ask 6 questions to help identify if you're a sugar burner versus a fat burner. So I'll ask your audience these 6 questions. If you answer yes to 2 of these 6 questions, 2 or more of these 6 questions, high probability you're a sugar burner and probably have insulin resistance. First question is, do you feel tired after eating meals? Second question, do you snack in between your meals? Third question, do you have more than 20 pounds of extra weight on your body? Third question, do you have any skin tags on your body? They usually show up around your eyelids, your neck, your armpit area. The fifth question is, do you have any brown patches underneath your armpits or around your neck? And the sixth question is, if you skip a meal, do you get hungry and angry? If you're listening and watching and you said yes to two or more, you're a sugar burner. And that's an issue because, as I mentioned, that leads to a whole bunch of issues. But the good news is that there's things you can do about it. So if we've got some other lab work done, here's what I would look at. I like the A1C. The A1C is great. Insulin will change before the A1C, but the A1C, a blood test looking at the 3-month average of your blood sugar, when it's elevated, it will age you very fast. It will strip collagen from your body, which makes your skin look old and wrinkly. So visibly, it ages you, but internally, it's aging you as well. When you're a sugar burner, you're not metabolically free. You're in a metabolic prison. You have energy fluctuations throughout the day. You're relying on snacking and grazing for a short energy burst. You just don't feel satisfied. You're hungry all the time. And the A1C will show you if your blood sugars are elevated. Ideally, we want that A1C to be 5.2% or below. That's showing you're aging gracefully. Once that A1C gets around to 5.7% to 6.4%, you're considered pre-diabetic, and anything above is considered diabetic. And there's a study that I put in the book that shows when the A1C is at 7.5% or higher, every single year it's at that level, they estimate 100 days come off the person's lifespan. So if it's at that level for 15 years, you lose 4 years off your lifespan. That is because when you have high levels of sugar in your body, it strips nitric oxide. You've had Dr. Nathan Bryan, right, Jesse?
Yes.
Brilliant guy, world-renowned researcher on nitric oxide, great buddy of mine. Nitric oxide is such an important gaseous molecule. It's responsible for so many things, cell signaling and mitochondrial support. But one of those main things it's responsible for is vasodilation, where nitric oxide opens up your blood vessels, which allows blood flow, oxygen, nutrients to deliver to tissues for healing. When your blood sugars are elevated, it lowers and strips nitric oxide, which creates vasoconstriction, the narrowing of your blood vessels, which makes your heart have to pump harder to get the job done, which is what? High blood pressure, which is one of the leading causes to heart disease. So we want to look at the A1C to see if it's elevated. Now, inflammation is another key metric here. There are several inflammatory markers you could look at. I would argue that fasting insulin, although it's not a direct inflammatory marker, to me, it's an indirect inflammatory marker, but high sensitivity C-reactive protein, HSCRP, great inflammatory marker to look at systemic inflammation. You want to see that under 1.0. For me, I like to see it under 0.5. And homocysteine is another great inflammatory marker looking at inflammation. You want to see that in the single digits. So those would be some key markers I would look at and test at least once a year, but even better every 6 months.
For somebody coming to this conversation, say they're having a standard diet or standard type diet, they're about to make the changes we're talking about. How long before they introduce a Keto Flex day? Let's take them right through the process. Say tomorrow is day 1, what that diet looks like over the next 30 days as they're regaining metabolic health.
So the way that I have it outlined in Keto Flex with the 30-day plan, the first week of that 30-day plan is to go from burning sugar to burning fat. So we eliminate the snacking, we gradually lower the carbohydrate intake, we follow that 2-2-2 rule, we increase electrolytes. Really, really simple. And for most people, by day 7, you're fat adapted. Week 2 is where we experiment with intermittent fasting, time-restricted feeding, where we start with a 12-hour fast. So if you're done eating at 7 p.m., you just go until 7 a.m. without food, 12-hour fast, pretty simple. Then we extend it to 14 hours and then 16 hours. Week 3, we manipulate that fasting schedule and we throw in some 24-hour fasts. We increase our step count. I talk about taking vitamin G daily, which I'll talk about later, and walking after meals, some different biohacks that you incorporate. When we get to week 4, which is days 22 to 30-ish, there are 2 days on that final week that we have that metabolic flex day, the keto flex day. So to answer your question, we are pretty strict for 3 weeks where we're not having high carbs, and by week 4 we incorporate those metabolic flex days. And with those metabolic flex days, Jesse, yes, we're increasing the carbs, but it's not necessarily a high carb day, meaning it's still considered low carb in the grand scheme of things. It's still 100 to 150 grams of carbs, more like a paleo diet. It is somewhat low carb, just not very low carb keto, but we're doing that really strategically. We're doing something called metabolic chaos, as I talk about in the book, or not metabolic chaos, metabolic confusion, which is a good thing, because if we think about the greatest fitness trainers and personal trainers and the program P90X, why it was so successful, because of muscle confusion. You're always changing up the routine, keeping the body adapting and guessing so you don't plateau. It works really, really well. We're doing the same thing here with our metabolism, metabolic confusion, where we're changing things up week by week. So by week 4, you've done the work. We'll add in 2 days that week where we have these flex days where you can increase the carbohydrate intake and actually enjoy yourself.
And for somebody that goes through that 30 days, they've had their 2 days of flexing. When they move forward and back to quote unquote their regular diet from that point forward, what does a typical week look like? And how many keto flex days should they have?
It really depends on how much weight they still need to lose and how insulin resistant they are. So it'll vary, right? So if you still have a lot of weight you need to lose at that point, I would continue to follow that week 4 outlined for the next maybe month or so to see how it goes for you. You can mix things up and throw in a longer fast. Something that is super powerful is actually doing a 100-hour fast, which I know we're going to talk about later. But you can incorporate some longer, what's called block fasting, to mix things up. But you could simply follow that week 4 guideline over and over and over until you achieve your goal weight, because it gives you enough keto and structure and fasting, which is more catabolic repair breakdown, and then enough of the mTOR build up with the metabolic flex day. So mTOR is growth. Keto and fasting is more autophagy and repair and breakdown catabolic. So it gives you enough balance of both so that week 4 can continue to be done until you achieve your goal weight and your results.
Okay. So week 4 would be sort of a typical week for you at this point then?
Kind of. So what I do differently personally is instead of having 2 metabolic flex days, I just have 1. So for me, Sunday is my feast day. I do carnivore Monday through Saturday. So it is keto, and I do fasting on those, intermittent fasting on those days. So Monday through Saturday, I'm in ketosis. I eat mostly meat. I practice intermittent fasting. On Sunday, I don't fast. I have around 300 grams of carbs on that day. I play basketball, so it's a lot of cardio on that day. And then I go back to carnivore fasting keto on Monday. That's my current routine.
Okay. So for you, it's carnivore during the week. There's also low carb, which is a vague term. It could, in my mind, mean from anywhere from 1 carbohydrate a day, gram-wise, to 100. And then there's ketogenic, which you've already talked about, 50 grams or less. What I'm getting at with all this, how do you look at different benefits of being on different places of that spectrum? Because obviously, the further you go down towards carnivore, the more challenging it's going to be socially, the farther you're going to be coming from whatever diet you're on now. So basically, how do you feel about those different buckets? Low carb, keto, carnivore, and how does somebody know how far to push it?
They're all tools. They're all really valuable tools. If you're a beginner, you're starting with low carb, you're shifting into keto, you're practicing intermittent fasting, you're following the plan the way it's laid out for you. If you already have been doing keto and doing intermittent fasting, your next level would be carnivore, right? That's typically the evolution of how most people do it. They go from standard American diet to low carb to keto, fasting, and then carnivore. So it depends on where you're at in your journey right now. And then you could find a routine that works for you. There could be some days you want to do carnivore because it really helps with mental clarity, energy. You feel incredible. Like when I have a really busy month, like this last few weeks and the next few weeks coming up, really, really busy for me. On the days I have something on my calendar, which is Monday through Saturday, I'm carnivore because I want to feel great. I want to have amazing energy. Today I'm carnivore. I want to crush it. And then on the day that I am not doing any meetings and I'm just playing basketball and hanging out and studying, I have carbs. So I'm kind of matching it to my lifestyle, but that's my current routine. But find what works for you. Some people, the more muscle mass you have, you could get away with more flex days, more carbohydrates, because that muscle, the more muscle you have, the more insulin sensitive you are. Meaning, if you did not have much muscle mass and you had 100 grams of carbs, you would have to produce a lot of insulin to clear that excess glucose. But if you have the same 100 grams of carbs, but more muscle mass, instead of producing that much insulin, your body will clear, or not clear, but use a lot of that glucose to be refilled into your muscle cells, your glycogen stores, because it's like a sponge that absorbs the glucose. So less insulin is produced. You could get away with more. So it really depends on the person, where they're at with their muscle mass and their goals. But if you're insulin resistant, overweight, obese, you want to be more regimented and do more keto, more fasting until you hit those goals.
To me, there's two different aspects to this, and you've touched on both. One being hormonal, where the lower the carb, we're going to have less blood glucose, less insulin. And then that's going to be getting us more metabolically healthy over time if we sustain that. And then the benefits of ketones themselves, which somebody that's only in that low carb realm isn't going to get that ketone boost to the brain, anti-inflammatory benefits. So I want to make sure we're clear. There are additional benefits from ketones specifically. And then there's the whole insulin blood glucose piece that we've been talking about.
Absolutely. You said it correctly, Jesse. Yes. Low carb has its benefits, and when I say low carb, I'm referring to 75 grams to 100 and let's say 150 grams of carb. This is my definition of low carb, but very low carb is what I call keto, under 50 grams for most people. Ketones have so many benefits beyond what people realize. I mean, there's nothing new about keto. It's just nuanced, or maybe new to some people, but those ketones communicate directly with every mitochondria in your cell. They're signaling molecules, and it creates mitochondrial biogenesis, which simply means the creation of new mitochondria. When that happens, your cells produce more energy, more ATP. So you have more energy. And with that extra energy being produced, you naturally burn more calories. It increases your basal metabolic rate, where you become more efficient. You get those benefits with ketones. When you're low carb and your carbs are not low enough to do keto, you're not benefiting from that. So yes, there's different spectrums here. I do recommend everybody try keto because you're going to feel incredible. It's just absolutely remarkable what it does to change the body. It upregulates glutathione. It lowers inflammation. It's incredible for the body.
And as somebody that spends a lot of time in ketosis naturally based on the way you're eating, do you ever hack that with things like MCT oil, exogenous ketones? You talked about having days where you want to perform exceptionally well, where you're on the ball and thinking. Do you ever use those on those days?
I do. Yeah. So MCT oil is a great way to increase ketone production, specifically caprylic acid, which is C8. It has the most research in terms of ketone production. So I sometimes put C8 in my coffee, and I'd love to talk about why coffee is like one of the greatest fat burning health tools there is. We could get into that later, but I'll put it into my coffee. And even foods that are loaded with medium chain triglycerides, like goat cheese and sheep cheese, contain about 30% MCT fats, which help with ketone production. So to your point, yeah, you could hack that. There's a way for your body to produce more ketones when you consume these medium chain triglycerides in the form of like MCT oil powder or sheep and goat dairy.
And what about exogenous ketones specifically, the salts, the esters?
I like them. They're great tools. I'm very cautious because people think they could continue to eat a high carb diet and just take exogenous ketones and not do the work. You're not going to get the same benefits, but to support your ketogenic approach, I think it's fantastic. It's a great way, especially if some people struggle to go from burning sugar to burning fat. It's a great way to introduce some ketones as you make that transition. I know that I've used exogenous ketones on and off over the years. I've used it during like fasted exercise, workouts, just before I hit the stage, before I do a podcast. It's just a great way to get some additional ketones in your body.
So when it comes to a brain boost, we've talked about ketones, whether that be through the diet or through exogenous or MCT oil, and then your body making them. Creatine, which has benefits for the brain and the body. You've mentioned electrolytes, which can have brain benefits. I'm trying to think, was there one other one we've talked about when it comes to a supplement that helps the brain?
Vitamin G.
We haven't gotten to that. You've mentioned it. I know methylene blue. That's something you're a fan of. We talked about that last time.
Yep.
Basically, at this point in the conversation, let's bring different brain biohacks we haven't talked about in. Methylene blue, melatonin, other things you might be using.
Ginkgo biloba. I took some right before this conversation. I took ginkgo biloba. I forget how many milligrams, maybe 500. Ginkgo biloba helps to deliver blood flow to the brain. So it helps with productivity, focus, clarity. I took that. I also took methylene blue this morning. And when you combine methylene blue with either sunlight or red light, it really activates it. It's great for the mitochondria. It's interesting because there's a lot of conversation now about like Paul Saladino, and I think I saw somebody else talk about the problems with methylene blue, but I'm still a fan of it. It's going to support the mitochondria, and a lot of people have mitochondrial dysfunction. With that being said, I'm not a fan of taking methylene blue every day. I use it cyclically. I think everybody should use it cyclically, and I'll do cyclical high doses, like 20 milligrams of methylene blue, but I'm not doing it every day. But it feels incredible. My brain gets turned on. So methylene blue, ginkgo biloba. Dr. John Laurence has a great product called Satori, which has a few of these ingredients and properties in it. So I took that this morning as well. MCT oil, exogenous ketones, melatonin is great for the brain as well. And when I say melatonin, I'm talking about like high dose melatonin, 100 milligrams to 200 milligrams of melatonin before bed. Great for brain health, immune system, oxidative stress, and fasting. Fasting is great for improving brain-derived neurotropic factor in the brain, which is like brain fertilizer.
Well, you mentioned coffee. We can bring that in here too. Caffeine.
Yeah.
So you talked about it being a potent adjunct when it comes to fat loss. Bring in coffee and talk about how you use that for fat loss and brain health.
I think coffee is underrated. And when I say coffee, it needs to be the right type. And I'll explain what I mean. But coffee has been shown to support cardiovascular health, actually support high blood pressure. People think it raises high blood pressure. It's not common to do that. The caffeine and the chlorogenic acid, the CGA in the coffee is where the magic happens. So chlorogenic acid, it's one of the most powerful polyphenols in coffee beans. It's been shown to help the body break down fatty acids for fuel, increase ketone production because you're breaking down fatty acids for fuel. It's been shown to help your liver produce healthier levels of bile, which is a detergent to break down fat and helps with detoxification. It's been shown to lower LDL small particle, like bad cholesterol particles, and also boost brain health, and also help with fat loss. There's a Norwegian study I put in the book that showed women who are drinking high CGA coffee lost twice the amount of weight versus women who are drinking low CGA brews. So not all coffee is created equal. When I say coffee, I am not talking about, I don't know if I could call them out in your show, but commercial chains out there that you find all over the place. I'm not talking about the places that you find in the airport at your corner store. I'm referring to organic, ideally fair trade coffee that has been tested for contaminants like heavy metals, molds, and you want it to be a medium roast. If it's a dark roast, you lose about 75% of the CGA, and that has a lot of the benefits. So you want to be a medium roast, or a light roast has more caffeine. I like a medium roast. And organic, the way I make mine is with a French press. I use a certain brand out there that's organic and it meets all my criterias. And I sometimes I'll put protein in my coffee. Sometimes I'll put the MCT oil, not putting the butter anymore, but that's the way I make it. But it's great for fat loss, great for energy, great for the brain. It's a great tool in the shed.
Tying back to what we talked about earlier, where if we're taking in fat, we're not going to burn fat to the same extent. Somebody new to this, incorporating coffee in the morning, would you say to keep out the MCT at that point and then use that later on when they get to their ideal weight?
If they're new, Jesse, I'm okay with them adding the MCT oil and even the butter because it's just going to help them feel better as they transition. First, when I say new, the first couple of weeks. After that, Yes, what you just said is a good idea. Let's start lowering the fat intake by removing the butter, removing the MCT oil. If your goal is to lose fat, belly fat, yes, because what we said earlier, you're going to have to metabolize the fat calories before your body fat. So, yes, I would recommend removing that until you get close to your goal weight.
Earlier, you talked about how in your 30-day protocol, the second week, you start introducing intermittent fasting for people. For somebody that's brand new to that practice, let's go over how they begin.
You start with eliminating the snacks, having just 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Let's say it's 8 a.m., 12 a.m., and 8 p.m. First, that's how you start. Then you start with a 12-hour fast, which is right there, right? If you're done eating at 8 p.m. and you wait until 8 a.m., you're fasted for 12 hours. What I mean by fasted, no food, just water. You get away with tea. That's it during your fasting window, and some electrolytes. That's it, unflavored electrolytes. Then you build up the fasting window to 14 hours. So you could do that in this example by either taking your dinner from 8 p.m. to 6 p.m. or taking your breakfast from 8 a.m. to 6 a.m. It doesn't matter, but 14 hours fasted, that leaves you with a 10-hour eating window. Then we build you up to a 16-8 where you're fasted for 16 hours and you have an 8-hour eating window. You're still having 3 meals in that window, but it's condensed to a 8-hour window. And then we continue to go to an 18-6 schedule where it's 18 hours fasted, 6-hour eating window, 2 or 3 meals, depending on how much food you want to have in that window. And then we kind of progress to a 24-hour fast, and then we could get more aggressive with these longer fasts.
Okay, but when it comes to maintenance day to day, is 18-6 the baseline?
Yeah, I like 18-6 as a standard day-to-day sort of maintenance protocol. It gives you enough time in a fasted state to get these amazing benefits and enough time in your eating window, 6 hours, to get your protein requirements. So I do like an 18-6.
Okay, you mentioned tea can be had during the fasting window. What about coffee and then coffee with fat? I think you mentioned you put collagen or protein in yours. If we start adding some of these things in, is that still part of the fasting window?
That's actually the number one question I get asked when I talk about fasting, Jesse. Does coffee break a fast? What breaks a fast? Okay, first we need to discuss, what does it mean to break a fast? My definition of breaking a fast is when you, number one, start your digestive processes and you lose the autophagy benefits, the cellular cleanup process. And that happens when you raise glucose, when glucose goes up. So for me, my definition of breaking a fast is when you raise glucose. With coffee, let's say black coffee, it's different. And I've tested this with hundreds of people. You know, Dr. Pompa, you've had on the show. He's
Yeah.
my mentor, a great friend of mine. When we were doing his conferences back in 2018, 2019, we would have Keto Mojo was a sponsor of his conferences, and we would talk about this coffee break a fast. So we had hundreds of people line up and test their blood glucose and ketones, drink the coffee and test it again to see if coffee breaks the fast. And we discovered that it's kind of like 50-50, meaning the best way to know is to test your blood glucose right before you have the coffee. Let's say it's 85 milligrams per deciliter, which is a great fasting glucose. Drink the coffee, test it an hour later, and see what happens to the glucose. If the glucose goes up 5 points or higher, yes, you are breaking the fast. It's lowering the autophagy benefits. If the glucose stays the same or drops, it's not breaking the fast. And what we discovered is that it's different for everybody. The only way to know is to test. With the fats, you could do the same thing in test, but you should know you are going to burn the calories from the fat versus the body fat. With tea is safe. Tea seems to be safe as long as there's no sugar added and artificial sweeteners. Tea is safe. Water is safe. Unflavored electrolytes are safe. Protein in the coffee, like I do, breaks the fast. I'm breaking my fast when I do that. I had about 40 grams of collagen protein in my coffee this morning. That will break a fast. Any protein that's over like 5 grams or so will break the fast. It'll raise glucose.
Okay, you touched on this earlier. Let's go into longer fasts. So somebody's gone through the 30 days and they're looking to incorporate longer water fasts. First of all, who is this for? And then how long can somebody do that on their own?
This is for somebody who's already been practicing intermittent fasting. You're ready to experiment with longer fasts. And I got to tell you, like, what happens inside of your body when you go without food, let's say for 100 hours, which is 4 days and 4 hours, is absolutely incredible. I'll share a timeline here for your audience on what is going to happen inside of the body. So the first 14 hours without food, two major things happen at the 14-hour mark. Number one, you're starting to lower the hormone insulin. Insulin is a hormone that signals fat storage. That becomes lowered and it unlocks fat burning. You start to burn belly fat, body fat. Second thing that happens here is that you complete digestion. It takes about 14 hours to complete digestion. So there's a process that gets activated called energy diversion. It's one of my favorite benefits to fasting. It takes a lot of energy to digest food. When you complete digestion at that 14-hour mark of a fast, you now divert that energy that would have been used for digestion, and that's being directed to the brain to heal the liver, the kidneys. Your inner physician will determine where to direct that energy. So this happens 14 hours in. Once you get 16 to 17 hours into the fast, you activate a cellular cleanup process called autophagy. Autophagy is one of the best things you can do to get rid of cells in your body that are not producing energy efficiently, that are not burning fat efficiently. It's kind of like a refrigerator that when you open up a refrigerator, it has all these groceries that have an expiration date. If you let all the groceries inside of your refrigerator expire, but don't throw them away, you just let them expire and sit there and put new groceries, it's going to be a toxic environment. The human body is very similar. We have cells and mitochondria that all have an expiration date. And autophagy, 16, 17 hours into a fast, it gets activated to start getting rid of those expired cells, fixing damaged mitochondria that are not burning fat for energy and helping them burn fat. This process gets ramped up around the 16 to 17 hour mark. Now, as we move into 24 hours without food, there's a intestinal stem cell reboot where stem cells within your digestive system are actually repairing the gut microbiome. So this helps with anybody struggling with digestive issues, acid reflux, GERD, bloating, indigestion, SIBO, which is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. The 24-hour fast, you start to clean that up. And a second thing happens 24 hours in, Jesse, which is human growth hormone surge. A study showed that there's a 2,000% increase in human growth hormone at the 24-hour mark in men, and a 1,300% increase in human growth hormone at the 24-hour mark in women. Human growth hormone is anti-aging, it's fat burning, it's muscle preserving and muscle building. I mean, people pay thousands of dollars to have human growth hormone injected into them, but you get a huge increase for free at the 24-hour mark. As we shift 36 hours without food, there's a surge in ketones, meaning you start to burn a ton of belly fat. Those ketones start to increase your metabolic rate, which is your metabolism's ability to burn fat. It turns the brain on where you have clarity and focus, and it surges something in the brain called brain-derived neurotropic factor. This is where 36 hours in, it's like a spiritual experience. It's hard to put it into words, but this is why I think every religion practices some form of fasting, because of what's happening with this brain fertilizer. I know that I just feel more creative. I feel more connected to God. You would feel more connected to your source, whoever that is. That happens 36 hours in with the fat loss, the ketone production. As we continue with this fast, 48 hours without food, 2 days, there's a dopamine reset. So many people that are struggling with happiness and joy and addiction, they're relying on social media hits to get that dopamine hit. They're relying on processed sugar and addictions, drugs to get that dopamine hit, alcohol. You could reset the D2 receptor sites in the brain. Studies are showing 48 hours into a fast. So that's the dopamine reset 48 hours in. Now, as we continue, Jesse, 72 hours into this fast, the entire immune system is reset. Dr. Valtralongo has shown this in studies, and other people have shown this in studies, where the immune system starts going through this autophagy process of like Pac-Man going in the immune system looking for these what's called senescent cells. These are zombie cells, cells that are not functioning at all, and it's zapping them, for lack of a better word, apoptosis, programmed cell death, and then it produces stem cells. And then around the 100-hour mark of this fast, 4 days, 4 hours without food, stem cell activation, stem cell surge, where your body's replacing all of these cells that it's gotten rid of with new cells. These are new cells for the liver, for the eyeballs, for the brain, for the kidney. I mean, your innate intelligence will determine where those cells go. It is absolutely remarkable. It's one of the most powerful healing tools that I would recommend for anybody, but you got to do it the right way. You got to build up to it and know what you're doing.
Okay, and we talked about different things that we could include when it came to intermittent fasting. Would those same rules apply during this 100-hour fast?
Meaning, what can you have during the fast?
Exactly.
Yeah, if you want to get the most benefits, I would only have water. It's funny. When I say water fast, most people think it means fasting from water. It kind of sounds like that, but that's not what it means. A water fast means you're only having water. If you want to get the most benefits here, only have water and electrolytes, unflavored electrolytes and minerals. That's it. Once you start having supplements or even coffee or different things, you're pushing your innate intelligence certain directions and you might lose some of these benefits. So water and unflavored electrolytes and minerals are the best thing to do to get the most benefits here.
And somebody like yourself, applying this as a tool, how often would you do a 100-hour fast?
I said anybody should do this. I was wrong. That's not correct. Not everybody should do this. Look, if you're underweight, you should not do this. If you're diabetic, you need to work with a practitioner. Everything we're talking about here is not medical advice. Number 3, if you have a history or a current eating disorder, work with somebody on this. You don't want to stir things up there. If you're under 18, a child, probably not a good idea because you want to grow. Outside of that, how often should you do it? Once a year is a good idea. Once a year is good maintenance. Now, if you're overweight and obese, you could do it once a quarter, once every 3 months. For me, I do it once a year.
And earlier we talked about the importance of muscle. Somebody going without food for that period of time, saying to themselves, aren't I going to lose a bunch of muscle over that 100 hours? Talk about what happens in that respect.
It's interesting because to answer your question, the short answer is not 100% sure. I'm not exactly sure what's happening here with the muscle part because I've seen some studies showing there's some muscle loss. I've seen some studies showing there's no muscle loss. I've interviewed people you've interviewed, Dr. Jason Fung, Mike Mutzel, and I've had this conversation with them. Dr. Fung is pretty clear that you lose some muscle and then you regain healthy muscle and then the rebound is better. Mike Mutzel is kind of on the fence like me where I am at. Here's where I'm at right now with it. I'm not 100% sure, but here's where I'm at. There's probably going to be some muscle loss during those 4 days. Now, the human growth hormone will preserve a lot of the muscle. I think you're losing mostly muscle volume, which is water and some fiber in the muscles, but not necessarily muscle protein. And we're not looking at the full picture. Dr. Fung has a really good point. When they measure the muscle mass of somebody going through a long fast, they do see a decrease. And then they say, oh, fasting is not good. You lose muscle. But to his point, when they measure that muscle a week later, 2 weeks later, they see a huge rebound and sometimes even more muscle mass because of the stem cells and the mTOR activation. And you're losing what he calls junky muscle mass, junky protein, and then you're gaining back healthy protein, healthy muscle mass. So I'm kind of inclined to agree with Dr. Fung. He's the godfather of fasting, and I love that guy. But I'm still not 100% sure, Jesse. That's kind of where I stand right now.
And this ties into what you were just talking about, the muscle mass piece. How do you feel about somebody doing resistance training during that 100 hours to maintain, possibly even build muscle? And you talked about the benefit of autophagy. Exercise, we know, can boost that as well.
I don't like the idea of throwing in exercise during a long fast. Here's why. Yes, you can do it. But if you exercise during a long fast, like when I say long fast, let's categorize that as 2 days or longer. You're going to use energy for the workout versus energy for healing. I want my body to be in a completely healing state. I don't want to use energy and resources for working out at that time. So I wouldn't recommend it. You do get autophagy with exercise and strength training. Another benefit to building muscle. Absolutely. Autophagy is kind of happening all the time, most of the time to certain degrees, but it's really activated with exercise, strength training, burst training, fasting, and certain senolytic supplements like spermidine, green tea extracts, certain mushroom extracts could activate it. So there's different ways to do it, yeah. But my favorite way to activate autophagy is through fasting. I just love fasting. I think it's one of the best ways to harness the innate intelligence and remove the interference, and just it's nature's reset button. That's why in Metabolic Freedom I have a whole chapter. Chapter 8 is all about how fasting is needed for metabolic freedom.
Talk more about the different supplements there we can take to enhance autophagy. And then would that be something you'd ever recommend or use yourself during a longer fast? And then also I could see how if it's too much during, say, 100-hour water fast, maybe if we know autophagy starts around that 18-hour mark, maybe we could incorporate it on a medium length fast and really focus in on that part.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I would take these, they're called senolytics. These are certain supplements that activate autophagy. So spermidine is one of them, which is a wheat germ, and it has an unfortunate name. Green tea extract is another one. Certain mushrooms like lion's mane and others out there. Fisetin is another one. Fisetin is, I think it's is it from a strawberry, I believe? I think it's from a strawberry, but it's an extract from a fruit that activates autophagy. And you could take it during the fast. Yes, that would be the best idea. So it could be 12 hours in, 16 hours in, but it helps to enhance autophagy. The more metabolically flexible you are, the faster you get autophagy in a fast. The more metabolically damaged you are and more insulin resistant, the longer it's going to take. But you could take those supplements during a fast. It'll enhance the autophagy. Coffee, high quality coffee could also be something you can do during those first 16 hours or so to enhance autophagy as well.
So we've been focused on autophagy. There's also a subcategory under that, mitophagy.
Yeah.
The mitochondria. How do you look at those two? When one's happening, is the other happening automatically? Or is there certain ways to enhance one and not the other?
They're both really important, right? To your point, Jesse, autophagy is the cellular cleanup of your cells and cell membranes, and then mitophagy is the autophagy of the mitochondria and mitochondrial membranes. I don't know if they're both happening at the same time. It's a really good question. I'm actually really curious to find out. Have you dug into that research at all?
No, I know they both come up in the same realm, and I know one's more of a general term, the autophagy versus mitophagy. But yeah, can we target different ones? Again, are they both happening at the same time always? Some questions there for both of us.
That's a really, really good question. I'm actually really curious to find out that answer. I wonder if you get autophagy, is mitophagy automatically activated at the same time? We'll find out. In terms of where the healing is occurring, this is dependent on the innate intelligence. I can tell you this really interesting story, and I've noticed this with a lot of people who do these longer fasts and get more autophagy. When I first did my first long fast, that was in 2018, I did a 5-day fast, just water only. On day 3, when I was really getting a lot of autophagy, I noticed that my lower back was hurting. It was like this pulsing pain. And for years, I struggled with lower back pain. And I thought, and I asked Dr. Pompa, like, what do you think is happening? He said, that's the autophagy healing that area. And when I've had students go through these longer fasts and kind of guided them through, they've told me very similar stories. Well, like they had an old injury in their knee or their elbow, their neck, and they felt a pain during the long fast. And it was autophagy healing that area. So the innate intelligence will heal the area that needs to be healed, whether it's the liver from fatty liver disease or heart disease, whatever it is. You can't really push it and tell it where we want it to go. The innate intelligence will determine where it wants to go, which is super cool because I just let my body do its thing. But I'm really curious to know if you're getting autophagy, are you automatically at the same time getting mitophagy within that cell? We got to do some research and find out.
Let's do it.
Yes.
So when it comes to going into a fast or coming out, the runways on either end, how far do we have to go into a fast? We've talked about all the way from intermittent fasting to 100-hour water fasting. How far does somebody have to go before they have to start considering how they're buffering that on either end?
Yeah, autophagy is great, but too much, it's not good. It's too catabolic. It could weaken your immune system. You will lose too much muscle eventually. There needs to be a balance to your point. So a lot of people have been doing one meal a day, OMAD, and it's really, really popular. And I have nothing against OMAD unless you're always doing OMAD. If you do one meal a day, every day, week after week, month after month, it's too catabolic. You're not going to get enough protein. You're going to lose muscle. Your metabolism is going to become more inefficient. But doing that, OMAD once or twice a week, a 24-hour fast, great. I mean, whenever I travel, Jesse, is an OMAD day. I'm fasting all day because I don't eat when I fly. But doing it every day, not a good idea. There needs to be a balance. You want to make sure you get enough protein most days. If you're getting your protein requirements at least 5 days a week, then whatever fasting schedule you're doing, it's fine. It's working for you. But if you're not hitting your protein requirement because you're doing too much fasting, there needs to be a change in your fasting window. You want to make sure you're balancing out the autophagy with the mTOR. mTOR is metabolic target of rapamycin. It's growth, it's anabolic, and protein, feasting, eating, fed state gets you there. There needs to be a balance of autophagy and mTOR. They work in an inverted relationship. So too much of either, it's not good. You want to have a balance of both. That's kind of the way I outlined it with the 30-day plan.
Say you're about to go into a 100-hour water fast. Will you eat anything specifically before that or as you're exiting that to help guide the body in or out?
Before that, I would just eat like I normally eat and just go right into it. Some people like to do it as a reset when they're, for the weekend, they had a whole bunch of carbs, maybe got off track. They could throw that in as a reset. That's okay if you've already done variations of fasting. How you break it is important. I'm glad you asked that question because when I create clips on social media, I don't have enough time to talk about how you break the fast. It's also really important. Yes, when you do a long fast, 2 days or longer, you want to make sure you break it the right way. You want to go low and slow. You don't want to break it too fast. You don't want to have too many carbohydrates. So the best way is to incorporate foods that are easy to digest and not a lot of food, meaning bone broth is a great way to break a long fast. Steamed vegetables with scrambled eggs and an avocado, great way to break a fast. A protein shake, great way to break a fast. Because when you are doing a long fast, your digestive enzymes are dropping. Your bile flow, your pancreatic enzymes, HCl, because your body's not eating. Why is it going to produce these enzymes? So by day 4, in this example of a 100-day fast, 100-hour fast, these enzymes are low. When you have a whole bunch of meat and carbohydrates, you're not going to break it down. Yes, you could take some enzymes. It'll support it. Ideally, you want to go low and slow. Have a small meal. Wait a few hours, have another small meal, and then you can start ramping it up. But bone broth is my go-to. Eggs, avocado, steamed vegetables are my go-to, or a protein shake is my go-to.
And you personally, what's the longest you've ever fasted for?
5 days is my longest. I'm actually due for one. I'm probably going to do a video on my next one and do some experiments on it. People like when I make videos on my experiments. So yeah, 5 days is my longest, but the Guinness World Record, I know you know this, is over a year. 382 days is Angus Barber. Now he had a coffee, he had a multivitamin, nutritional yeast, water, and tea, but he didn't eat for over a year, medically supervised. So of course that's an extreme example. I know people who have done 20 days, 30 days, but for me, 5 days is the sweet spot. I like 5 days of fasting.
How do you feel about places like True North, where people go for up to 40 days, fast just on water? Can you see additional benefits going even longer than what we talked about?
Yeah, I love Alan Goldhammer and True North. I did mention him in the book with their studies on high blood pressure. Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I love it because they're medically supervised. They're looking at all these metrics post, before, and after. And 10 days is a great time frame for healing. For me, 5 days seems to be the sweet spot. Like you get all those benefits I outlined, you break it. It's not 10 days. It's half of that. It's 5 days. But I think 10 days is great. I love what True North is doing, and they've been in the game for a lot longer than me, and they've worked with a lot more patients than I have. So I think what they're doing is fantastic.
When we opened up today talking about fat loss, you brought in 3 pillars: diet, which we've got into extensively, lifestyle, and we've talked about things like exercise, putting on muscle, and fasting and intermittent fasting, and then our thoughts. So before we part ways, I want to hit on any other lifestyle modalities that you would include somebody looking to burn more fat, and then we'll move into the mind.
Any other lifestyle modalities for burning fat? Yes. And then I love talking about the mind and your thoughts. Steps, walking. I think walking is so underrated, not just for longevity, but for fat loss. It's really the king, the queen, and everything in between when it comes to fat loss. But it needs to be the right amount of steps and the right timing of those steps. So before I share that, I'll share this. In Metabolic Freedom, forgetting the chapters here, chapter 11, I talk about walking and how it helps with fat loss. And there's a study with over 60,000 participants that showed the individuals who got 5,000 to 7,000 steps per day had a 65% reduction of dying of all-cause mortality versus those who got less than 3,000 steps a day. So we know it extends your lifespan. For fat loss, we want to time the walks after a meal. And I know we're busy and it's hard to do that. So if you could just choose one meal, your biggest meal of the day, and go for a walk after that meal, it could be as little as 10 minutes, but 30 minutes would be the best, but 10 minutes is fine. Walking after a meal is great for fat loss because when you eat food, you take that food and it's converted into sugar in your bloodstream. It's called a postprandial glucose response. The higher your sugars go after eating a meal, the more insulin is produced, the more you're in a fat storage state. When you go for a walk right after eating a meal, it blunts that postprandial glucose spike, meaning less insulin is produced. You're back into a fat burning state much faster. It activates the GLUT4 transporters, which simply means some of that glucose is now being shuttled into your glycogen stores versus being stored as fat. I like 10,000 steps a day as a minimum for fat loss. Building it up, and I talk about this during the 30-day plan, we build it up to 14,000 steps a day. But really, wherever you're at right now with your steps, calculate it, whether you're using an Oura Ring, an Apple Watch, a pedometer, old school pedometer. Find out where you're at right now with your steps and just work on increasing it. So if you're at 5,000 steps, get it to 6,000 and build it up. But 10 to 14,000 steps per day is terrific, especially when you time it after meals. And it's not in one walk. It's these exercise snacks throughout the day. Great for fat loss. So I would recommend throwing in some steps for that.
Any other hacks in that realm before we move into the mind?
Yeah, apple cider vinegar. Vinegar in general, but I love apple cider vinegar is great for many, many reasons. So having it before your meals also helps to digest the meal better. It helps your liver produce bile to break down the fats in the meal. And it helps with that postprandial glucose response. There's a study in the diabetes journal that I put in the book that showed individuals who took about 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar before their meals had a 34% reduction in their postprandial glucose versus those who didn't take the apple cider vinegar. And these were done in diabetic patients. It's great to have in a fast. It doesn't break a fast. It could support a fast. It's great to have before a meal. It's great to have after a meal. It's great to have before bed to help with belly bloat, to wake up with a flatter stomach. Add apple cider vinegar to your meals. Add vinegar to your salad dressings. It's a powerhouse of health and fat loss benefits.
All right, let's move into your favorite topic here as we close. The mind, vitamin G. We talked about this last time, but let's bring it all in relation to fat loss.
I don't remember, Jesse. Did I share the story at the beginning of the book about the railroad employee and the nocebo effect? Do you remember me sharing that? I did. I shared it with you last time.
Oh, not in the book. Yes.
In the book, yes. But did I share it?
No.
Okay, good. I'm glad you remembered.
I don't believe we did.
Okay. I start chapter 10 because you've read it. And by the way, Jesse is Jesse's one of the best podcast hosts out there because you actually read the books, you study your guests, you put together a game plan, you actually love and care about your job and what you're doing, and you're fantastic at it. So if you have not left a rating and review for the Ultimate Health Podcast, do it. It really helps Jesse grow. It helps him get the message out there. This is what he loves to do, and he's so good at it. So I recommend y'all do it because he's one of the best in the game, Jesse.
Thank you, Ben.
I mean that, bro.
And that really means a lot. And I'm not just tooting your horn. You're doing incredible work as well. And I'm always watching from afar. Yeah. Keep up the good work, buddy.
Thank you. Yeah. Like understands like. Energy feeds energy. Yeah. Thank you. And I mean it. Leave him a rating and review. Okay. Chapter 10 is my favorite chapter in the book. I'm probably going to write, my next book is going to be all about chapter 10, and I might call it Mental Freedom. I'm thinking about doing that. And chapter 10 is all about how your thoughts influence health or disease. You choose. And I start chapter 10 with a story. I will share the story right now to illustrate how powerful your thoughts are. Bob Proctor, who's from Toronto, shared this story with me. It is from the newspapers in the 1960s, and it's about a railroad employee, this train station employee, who worked inside of a train, inside of the refrigerator cart on this train. And he was working late one night. He didn't realize it gotten so late, and all of his coworkers had left for the night. He tried to exit that refrigerator cart. They had locked him in, and he was worried, because he knew nobody was coming back until the next morning. And he's trying to open up that door. He's banging on that door. Everybody's gone. Nobody could hear him. So his thoughts started to get the best of him. He started to think, I'm going to die here. I'm going to freeze to death. What am I going to do? Nobody's coming back until the next morning. And he started to write down on the wall, documenting his night. The newspapers caught this and they took photos of this. At 12 a.m., he wrote the words, I'm stuck in this refrigerator cart. It's cold. I'm not sure if I'm going to survive tonight. 1 a.m., still cold, shivering, cannot keep myself warm. 3 a.m., I'm freezing to death. I think I'm going to die. 7 a.m. rolls around. His coworkers clock in. They open up. They unlock that refrigerator cart. They look and they see this man has died. He froze to death, hypothermia. When they investigated that refrigerator cart, they determined that the temperature apparatus that this guy was looking at had been malfunctioning for weeks, and the temperature never dropped below 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Not cold enough to kill somebody, yet his thoughts created death. And if our thoughts can do that, do you think your thoughts could heal the body as well? The answer is 100% yes. That story is an example of the nocebo effect. There's also the placebo effect, how your thoughts could work for you. And we know that Dr. Bruce Lipton, and I did share this on a previous episode, he has shown that your thoughts communicate with your cells. You have 60,000 thoughts a day. This means you have 60,000 opportunities to put your body in an anti-inflammatory healing state with your thoughts. It's the greatest biohack in the world. And I talk about how you can do that in chapter 10. And the missing piece here is vitamin G. And I know I shared about vitamin G in the previous episode, but I'll just share one study from JAMA that Harvard published in JAMA. 49,275 nurses in this study. It's probably the greatest study ever done on, I almost gave it away, on vitamin G. And 49,275 nurses, and it showed the nurses who took vitamin G had a 9% reduction in dying from all-cause mortality versus the nurses who didn't, and a 15% reduction in dying from cardiovascular deaths versus the nurses who didn't take vitamin G. Vitamin G, if you listened or watched my previous episode with Jesse, is gratitude. I used to say it's the practice of gratitude. I no longer believe that. It's the feeling of gratitude. Gratitude is not a practice, it's a feeling. And there are studies after studies that show what gratitude does to restore your hormones, help you burn fat, produce oxytocin, increase your heart rate variability, put you in a parasympathetic state. Gratitude is where it's at. And I go deeper in the book, chapter 10. It's my favorite chapter. I cannot wait for your audience to read or listen to that part of the book.
It's incredible.
Thank
And
you.
Ben, last question for you. Tethering what you just talked about to fat loss specifically, can you talk about from either a catalyst or a way that we're blocking fat loss by not harnessing the mind correctly.
Yeah, the self-image. The way, if you view yourself as an overweight person, you're always going to be overweight. You're going to continue to sabotage yourself. You cannot outperform your self-image. What do I mean by your self-image? It's the way you view yourself, the way you're thinking of yourself. It's your thoughts, and it's not conscious. You could make a conscious decision. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to get off my medication. I'm going to do X, Y, Z. That's a conscious decision. But your self-image is in your subconscious. It isn't until you change that you will be able to break through, burn fat, get off the medication, whatever the goal is. And the only way, there's only two ways to change the self-image: and emotional impact. I talk about this in the book, but even better than that is the constant spaced repetition. Literally writing down that new self-image of yourself and repeating it, impressing it into your subconscious mind until it replaces the old self-image. And I show you exactly how to do that in chapter 10. I give you a specific affirmation to write that helps you accomplish this. If you're not working on the mind, it's an inside-out job. When I went through my 80 pounds of fat loss, it didn't start with keto, didn't start with fasting, it didn't start with coffee or supplements or biohacks. It started with my mind. It started with my thoughts. It started with self-development. That was the first shift. And I encourage you to not negate the power of your mind, the powerful thoughts that you have. It could hurt you. It could heal you. You choose.
Ben, the new book, Metabolic Freedom, it's a great read. It's going to help a lot of people. Really enjoyed round 2. Thank you for coming back on. You're doing incredible work out there. Keep it up. I thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. And I'll just say one quick thing with the book. It's metabolicfreedombook.com, where you could get the book along with a free course on the metabolism, 12 lessons, along with exclusive interviews in that course you cannot find anywhere else, with Dr. Jason Fung, Dr. Daniel Pompa, Cynthia Thurlow, and Megan Ramos over at metabolicfreedombook.com. Jesse, I appreciate you, man. Love the work you're doing. Thanks for bringing me back.
You too. And we're going to link it all up in the show notes, including your website, your social media, your YouTube channel. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Jesse.
Now that you're done, you're going to want to stick around here and catch this other incredible episode. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you over there.
I did the experiment. So I did 90 days of carnivore, and a couple of interesting things happened. I dropped 6% body fat, meaning a total of 6% body fat reduction during the 90 days. And I didn't even realize that I needed to lose those 6% body fat.